Hello and welcome to my game design presentation. Today I will be discussing first of all my first draft for my game War Between Worlds before discussing my thoughts on some peer reviews, what and finding out what I've incorporated and then what I've kept as the same. So for the game details, uh, the graphics were initially supposed to be mainly like realistic for to create like a serious tone of said game, but there'd be some level of cartooniness just to kind of almost take away a sense of that seriousness in certain elements because as it stood, the target audience was could have included children. And for the genre would be a fantasy strategy game as well as an FPS where there were supposed to be different stages, including things like tower defense segments as well as fight hand-to-hand combat and range combat segments, where part of it is raiding planets consisting of different alien races. We'll get onto why as this goes on, allowing for uh, the power-ups as well as other progression through like stuff like armor and whatnot. So for the target platform, it would have started on PC and then migrate to each relevant consoles as it stood. This would be the new gens like your PS5s, Nintendo Switches, and your Xbox Series X's. And as I said, the target audience would have been towards children, teenagers looking at 12 plus, as well as those interested in the sci-fi genre. This was the initial concept art with to showcase like what a futuristic human could human could look like, as well as showcasing a bit of the progression system with the in-game armor as it went on. And then onto the actual progression system, you'd basically the idea was you start in like a very basic world because in essence the society or the planet that you live on has kind of been ruined by years of years of tyranny, and your race is essentially subject to said tyranny. And one of the first missions is where you actually get a taster to see what powerful armor looks like. And as this mission goes on, it would break, and then you'd get a cybernetic um, limb, in this case an arm. As you did raid other planets, you could gain resources to upgrade your own, and then this would be either completely by force or by taking over from this larger power that's ruined your planet and ruining the lives of those planets in your ecosystem, you could say. And as it went on, you would be able to upgrade your armor, starting off with a bit of like basic armor, which won't, which will be quite weak, and then can be upgraded and changed as the game would have progressed. And a little bit on the story is that it would have been, you could have been either an evil dictator or like a legendary hero. And then for a bit more context, as I've said, some of this I've already said, being a subordinate of a higher power, as well as what I failed to mention is that invasions will come from other planets because they're again subjugated to that tyranny. But the in-game lore reason for you not basically getting like the hardest bosses straight away simply comes down to you're not viewed as a threat straight away. I mean, think about it. This is something that based off of the Supreme Leader's experience happens all the time. So it's one of those where you're not viewed as a threat straight away because of the main antagonist's own ego, and that is ultimately his biggest downfall, where he or she tries to turn you to their side, which is kind of where you get the main split path from. And then, as I've said, you can either free the planets or instead of freeing said planets, you can rule them yourself. That was the first draft sorted. So that's everything I initially thought. Where that was my basic idea, and then I asked for some feedback to see what I could do about it. What I didn't know is that based off the peer review, very Halo-esque. While the plan was that I would take some inspiration from pre-existing media, including admittedly Halo, as well as stuff like Star Wars, that sort of thing. What I didn't realise is just how similar the story was and how similar the game aspects were to Halo itself. I had never actually played a Halo game before, meaning I was more unaware of the actual game mechanics in Halo as well as their story as well. So as a result, I have had to change quite a lot of the game in terms of its story and progression and pacing, but the overall grounded concept will remain the same. And then another area of development is that this is quite smart, adding an online multiplayer, which I have actually incorporated, and I'll get into more detail with that as we progress, which is quite intelligent in terms of marketing. But as you can see, there are some things that have stayed the same. For instance, this is the revised story, with one of the main concepts being that while you're still an enslaved planet subjugated to tyranny, there's a bit more nuance to it, as your planet has basically been caught in both sides of the war, this intergalactic war, and you've basically been torn to shreds. This planet, you've lost many members of your family, many people close to you, as well as just the planet's overall stability and ecosystem. And then, as your character now is more of a veteran in terms of actually surviving for so long, considering everything that's happened, and you, alongside a select few, have also been able to survive this long. Create a plan with your fellow members of your own race to try and escape and rebel, considering how you're impartial to all sides because you hate both. In this fight, you do lose many family members and close friends, but you and someone else manages to survive, and then you both take the armor from one of the foot soldiers that you've killed, and then basically infiltrate from there. And this is where the nuance comes into play, because this game this game is quite semi-linear due to the fact that it does have multiple pathways. For example, they are known as the vigilante route, the pawn route, or the corrupt route. Where as a vigilante, similar to what was stated earlier, you do free them planets and they do join your side after persuasion, after you've ultimately freed them from their tyranny. And if you manage to, if for whatever reason you do lose in a certain mission, but you manage to escape, you can then use those as save points. And if you do die, they're some of the planets you can actually go back to. And then as the pawn route, you're basically this is where you kind of get manipulated into following one side's rules. Because your character is quite impressionable because of everything that's happened to you and your own internalized trauma. And if your character falls down this pathway, you do end up ultimately killing the other survivor, who happens to be your love interest, which basically just causes a bit of a rampage, ending in death by your own hand. If both characters, if you control both characters to do go down this route, you do end up fighting each other. In single player, I mean, you will end up fighting each other where you get the same outcome, but then some missions will be slightly tweaked, considering how you're both trying to manipulate each other. And then the corrupt route is basically, imagine the genocide route of Undertale, where in essence, instead of saving people, you kind of do the vigilante route in terms of you'll take over planets, but you'll kind of take over them to take power against the empire on the side that you're on, and players will make their way through the empire, killing many different bosses and generals until reaching the master. And then here, it's while you're still corrupt, you can get a almost neutral ending where you do kill the supreme leader of that race to kind of end the war. But as a war criminal, you do end up facing criminal charges, which leads in your um, slaughter. And then the alternative is you end up killing him and taking his place. And as this goes on, you do manipulate your other side, which again is your love interest, into missions that will benefit your own empire until you rule the galaxy at the cost of her life. But while as the story kind of progresses and it'll slow down quite a lot because part of the immersion is the character that you're controlling will also feel empty inside because the person you were fighting for has died because of yourself. And eventually, there is a mission where you actually control another character who overthrows you and kills you. And for the sake of a bit of a mechanical thing, you manage to keep in contact by communicating in methods that aren't tracked, like a certain electronic device. And then onto the game details. The graphics will be more realistic. Will be more realistic than before, and it does kind of completely cut out the whole cartoony, not cartoony, but unrealistic element. It has to be grounded in a sense of realism from the game. And the price is 25, is in a range of 25 to £35, with a very loose plan for DLC for the story at £15, and a free PvP mode where you'll be able to purchase a battle pass akin to games like Fortnite. The reasoning why the price is set at that range is simply because I don't have the funding to make a AAA game, which typically costs 70 to even £100 or $100 depending on your area, meaning that it's unreasonable to charge such a high amount because less people are able to buy it. And as I've said, the pacing is semi-linear, considering how, while there is a set in missions, there will be a set pacing. It does change depending on the story and how you change the story as you go on. And then the genre, it's primarily an FPS, where there will also be some third-person segments. And target platform, instead of starting on PC, it simply just releases on all relevant devices, which are the aforementioned PC, Nintendo Switch, PS5, Xbox Series X, and most likely Xbox One and PS4 as well. And the target audience are the young adults, the FPS crowd, and the sci-fi crowd. And the game will more likely than not be rated at PEGI 18, with at lowest it being PEGI 16. And then when it comes to mechanics, part of the game, a unique mechanic is that you'll have to control both characters in certain segments if playing single player. When playing multiplayer, uh, this won't really apply as much, but you can still, what's the word? You can still control multiple characters at given times. And you do get unique utilities, such as in the early game, you get boots to increase jump height, whereas later on you can get things like jetpacks and oxygen tanks, and these can also be upgraded throughout the game. Weapons will also, they'll have weapons of a of certain types exist, but all weapons under a certain category will use the same ammo supply, but each category uses a unique supply. What I mean by this is that, for example, if you have a weapon from one order or one power, this will use a certain ammunition. Whereas on the flip side, if you try to use that ammunition for a weapon from the other power, it won't work. And then as a vigilante, you'll be able to create your own weapons, which will use a different ammo supply as well. Primaries and secondaries as well will all use the same ammo. Obviously, if it's from the same uh, power, the same community almost. And as for armor, a unique mechanic is the fact that armor will have different types of durability. For example, if you have a armor specialized in piercing durability, you'll be stronger or more durable, sorry, when against blaster fire, but then certain explosives you'll be less protected against. Whereas if you use blunt force durability, it will have the opposite effect. And on top of that, the actual certain utilities like the jetpacks and oxygen tanks can in fact be targeted by the enemies as a weak point. That means you can be targeted in those areas, which could result in the early deaths despite your armor. And then this is overall some certain adjustments, such as things I've scrapped and things that I've tweaked but kept similar. Sorry. For example, in the first draft, I had planned to have some tower defense segments. This will just get scrapped because it's too much content for one. It doesn't really fit with the tone I'm going for. It convolutes the progression system even more than what it already could be convoluted, how it could already be convoluted, and the pacing will have to slow down dramatically because this tower defense would mean that you'd have to upgrade even more things, which takes even more time, which could result in the game becoming more monotonous and difficult to sit through. It'll be more accessible co-op wise with um, an adjustable difficulty slider, because this allows our game to be open to more players, more people who may not be as versed in an FPS game as others. And in terms of co-op, as I've tried to explain, uh, if you play 4-player, for example, instead of 2 characters surviving, it's 4 characters surviving, where you each can control one uh, character, where they will perform the same no matter who you pick, because that just kind of makes the game a bit simpler. And it's also focused on more ranged weaponry and ranged combat, as opposed to certain close combat segments, and any mystical powers that could have been obtained will be scrapped. For example, there was a plan to allow for things such as fireballs, but that kind of genuinely didn't really fit the tone of the game, as well as it just doesn't make sense. It's not grounded in anything at all. There's no realism involved there where there should be realism. And then on top, despite less quarters combat, there are still weapons for that, such as electric staffs, kind of like the ones in Star Wars. Not obviously not the lightsabers, but some certain droids use, and ionized daggers as well, being the main melee weapons. So I'd like to thank you for listening. These are some sources I've used to try and evaluate the review, as well as change certain things that people may have missed in the actual peer review itself. So thank you for listening.